gods and monsters. There are moments in history when the world holds its breath, when the fate of everything, past, present, and future, balances on the knife's edge so thin that reality itself seems to pause in anticipation. This was one of those moments. Kale stood in the deepest catacomb beneath the Cathedral of Eternal Light, and he was no longer entirely Kale. The Titan's gift had consumed the last vestiges of his humanity, transforming him into something that existed in the space between mortal and divine. His body was pure silver light now, barely maintaining a humanoid shape through sheer force of will. He could see everything. Every dimension, every possibility, every thread of fate stretching backward to the beginning of time and forward to its end. It was overwhelming, maddening. But he held on to one thought, one purpose. Destroy the anchors, save the world, whatever the cost. Above him, through miles of stone and earth, he felt them manifesting, four presences so vast and terrible that reality itself screamed at their arrival. The Shadow Council had come to end this personally, and somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, the final war began. Act 1. The Descent of Shadows. Scene 1. The Four Horsemen of Darkness. They appeared in the cathedral ruins simultaneously, four pillars of absolute darkness given form and will. Each manifestation was different, reflecting the nature of the shadow that inhabited it. The first shadow appeared as a woman of impossible beauty, wrapped in darkness that moved like liquid silk. But her eyes were voids that consumed hope itself, and her smile promised eternal suffering. The second shadow took the form of an armored giant, 20 feet tall, wielding a sword forged from solidified night. His presence radiated command, authority absolute, the will to dominate reality itself. The sixth shadow was a shapeless mass of tentacles and eyes, constantly shifting, impossible to focus on. Looking at it too long caused madness, as the mind struggled to comprehend geometry that shouldn't exist. And the seventh shadow, the eldest, the most powerful, manifested as a robed figure whose face could not be perceived. Where it walked, time itself stuttered and failed, past and future bleeding together into nauseating chaos. The catalyst hides below, preparing his final gambit. How predictable. His warriors assault the sixth anchor even now, 8 insects attempting to steal what is ours. Should we crush them first? Let them try, the seventh shadow replied, and reality rippled at the sound. They cannot succeed. The defenses are absolute. But the catalyst, he must die now, before he completes his transformation. Then we descend together, and we end 3,000 years of resistance in a single stroke. They began to sink through the cathedral floor as if stone was water, descending toward the catacombs where Kale waited, descending to what would be the last battle this world would ever witness. Scene 2. The Eighth's Assault. Above ground, Thomas led the remaining 7 warriors toward the sixth anchor's location. They'd split from Kale an hour ago, knowing they might never see him again. Knowing they were likely all going to die in the next few hours. The entrance is ahead, Elias said, pointing to a collapsed section of the cathedral that revealed stairs descending into darkness. According to the maps, the anchor is 3 levels down in what used to be the cardinal's vault. Defenses? Thomas asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad. Everything, Elias replied grimly. Shadow creatures, magical traps, reality warps. The Shadow Council poured millennia of preparation into protecting this anchor. It's designed to be impregnable. Then it's a good thing we're not trying to be subtle, one of the twin sisters said. She'd lost her sibling in the drowned forest, and grief had carved her into something sharp and deadly. We go in fast, hit hard, and don't stop until it's destroyed, or we are. They descended into the dark. Immediately the shadows attacked. Not mindless creatures like before, but tactical, coordinated forces. They'd learned from every previous battle, adapted to every strategy the warriors had employed. They're herding us towards a kill zone, Thomas shouted as a wall of darkness forced them down a specific corridor. Then we give them what they expect and hit them with something they don't, Elias said. He began chanting, weaving a spell that made the air itself shimmer. When I give the signal, everyone drop to the ground. Don't ask questions, just do it. They fought their way forward, losing ground with each step. The shadows were everywhere, pressing in from all sides. Just when it seemed they'd be overwhelmed. Now! Elias screamed. The warriors dropped. The mage completed his spell, and the entire corridor exploded with light so bright that it burned away every shadow instantly. The magical backlash nearly killed Elias. Blood poured from his nose and ears, but he'd bought them precious seconds. Go! Thomas roared, hauling the mage to his feet. Second level. They ran, racing against shadows that reformed behind them like a tide of darkness. Another warrior fell, dragged screaming into the void. Then another, overwhelmed by sheer numbers. But they reached the second level. 5 warriors now, 5 against an entire army of shadow. Just one more level, Thomas gasped. We can make it. We have to. Above and below them simultaneously, power began to build. Kale was engaging the Shadow Council. The very foundations of the cathedral shook with forces that should not exist in the mortal realm. Whatever happens, Thomas said to his remaining companions, we buy Kale every second we can. That's the mission. Nothing else matters. They descended to the 3rd level, into the heart of darkness itself. Scene 3. The Meeting of Titans. Kale felt them coming long before they arrived. 4 presences so vast they made the 3rd shadow seem like a candle compared to the sun. The full might of the Shadow Council, manifested and descending. He should have been terrified, should have been scrambling for any advantage, any edge that might let him survive the next few minutes. Instead, he felt calm. The Titan's gift had burned away fear along with everything else that made him human. All that remained was purpose, crystallized and absolute. They materialized around him in the deepest catacomb, a chamber so ancient it predated human civilization. The walls were carved with symbols that hurt to look at, depicting beings and events from the first age when the world was young and terrible. Kale Stormborn, once a slave in the mines of Blackstone, now something that defies categorization. You have come far, farther than any mortal should. But here your journey ends. "I know," Kale replied, his voice echoing with harmonics that shouldn't be possible. "I've known since the beginning, since I saw the visions in the orb. There was no other ending." "Then why fight?" the first shadow asked, genuinely curious. "Why struggle against the inevitable? Why not simply accept what must be?" "Because that's what it means to be human. To see the impossible and try anyway. To know you'll fail and fight regardless. That's the gift of mortality. The ability to choose defiance over acceptance." "You are no longer mortal," the second shadow observed. "Look at yourself. You are a weapon now."
Act 2. The Breaking of Worlds. Scene 4. Combat Beyond Comprehension. To call what happened next a fight would be to call the creation of the universe a small event. Forces collided that mortals were never meant to witness, that reality itself struggled to contain. Kale moved through dimensions that didn't have names, striking at the shadows from angles that shouldn't exist. His blade, no longer metal but solidified light, cut through darkness that had stood for millennia. The first shadow countered with tendrils of despair made manifest. Where they touched, matter aged 1 billion years in seconds, crumbling to dust. Kale dodged through time itself, moving backward a second to avoid the strike, then forward 2 seconds to attack from a position he hadn't occupied yet. The second shadow's sword carved reality like paper. Each swing opened rifts to the void between dimensions, to places where even light died screaming. Kale met blade with blade, and the clash sent shockwaves that collapsed the catacomb ceiling, that made the earth shudder for miles around. The sixth shadow attacked from every direction simultaneously, its form existing in multiple states at once. Tentacles, blades, crushing force. It was everything and nothing, impossible to defend against because there was no single point of origin. Kale stopped defending. He simply attacked, trusting the Titan's gift to keep him alive, pouring everything into offense. Silver fire erupted from his body, burning away tentacles faster than they could regenerate. And the seventh shadow, it simply unmade things. Causality itself bent around it, making effects happen before their causes, turning victories into defeats retroactively. It was the most dangerous opponent Kale had ever faced because it didn't fight in the present, it fought across time itself. "You cannot win," the seventh shadow declared and spoke with the weight of absolute certainty. "I have seen every future. In none of them do you survive. In none of them do your warriors succeed. This moment has already happened, and you have already lost." "Then I'll change the future," Kale replied through gritted teeth. He channeled more power, so much power that his body began to come apart at the seams. Silver fire erupted from him completely. He was dying. The Titan's gift was consuming him faster than it could rebuild him. Minutes left, maybe seconds. But he fought on. Scene 5. The sixth anchor falls. 3 levels up, Thomas and his 4 remaining companions reached the vault where the sixth anchor waited. It was smaller than the others, only the size of a human skull, but it pulsed with power that made the air itself scream. Shadow creatures poured from every corridor, an endless tide. The warriors formed a circle around Elias as he worked to break down the anchor's defenses. "I need 60 seconds, the mage shouted, blood streaming from every pore as he channeled magic beyond his capacity. "You'll have them," Thomas roared back, his blade singing as it cut through shadow flesh. They held for 10 seconds, 20, 30. One warrior fell, torn apart by shadow claws. 40 seconds. Another died, impaled by a dozen tendrils at once. 50 seconds. The twin sister went down fighting, taking a dozen shadows with her before the darkness claimed her. 55 seconds. Just Thomas and one other warrior remained, back to back, surrounded by an army that felt no pain and knew no fear. "Almost there!" Elias gasped. 60 seconds. The last warrior beside Thomas fell. Thomas stood alone, weapon raised, defiant to the end. "Come on then!" he screamed at the shadows. "Come on!" "Got it!" Elias completed the spell. The anchor's defenses shattered, and Thomas, with his last strength, drove his blade into its heart. The explosion was catastrophic. The entire third level collapsed. The second level followed. Shadow creatures by the thousands were simply erased from existence. Elias grabbed Thomas and ran, half dragging the injured warrior through disintegrating corridors as reality itself came apart around them. They burst into sunlight just as the cathedral's entire eastern wing collapsed into a smoking crater. 2 survivors, out of 8. But the 6th anchor was destroyed. Scene 6. One anchor remains. Kale felt the 6th anchor's destruction even in the midst of combat, felt the Shadow Council's power diminish, felt their grip on reality weaken. One anchor left, the 7th, the strongest, and it was in this very chamber, woven into the walls, integrated into the foundation so completely that destroying it would collapse everything. The shadows felt it too, felt their millennia of work crumbling. "No!" the first shadow shrieked. "This cannot be! We are eternal!" Nothing is eternal. Not you, not me, not even the world itself. Everything ends eventually. "Then we shall end you first," the second shadow roared. They attacked with renewed fury, no longer holding back, no longer conserving power. They threw everything at Kale, millennia of magic, all the stolen life force from countless sacrifices, the very essence of their existence. It should have obliterated him instantly. Instead, he absorbed it, channeled it, turned their own power against them. His body couldn't contain it, was literally coming apart, dissolving into pure energy. But his will held, his purpose remained. He could see the 7th anchor now, woven through the chamber's very structure like veins through flesh, could see the only way to destroy it: complete annihilation, a release of power so absolute that nothing within a mile would survive, including him, including his warriors above if they hadn't escaped yet. "Thomas," he whispered, hoping somehow the words would reach his friend. "Run! Get everyone out! Now!" Then he stopped holding back entirely. Scene 8. The ultimate sacrifice. The Titan's gift had a limit, a point beyond which even its reality-warping power couldn't sustain a mortal vessel. Kale had been approaching that limit for days. Now he crossed it willingly. Silver light exploded from his body, so bright it could be seen from space. The catacombs evaporated, the cathedral foundations liquefied, and the shadows, ancient, powerful, eternal, screamed as the light consumed them. "Impossible," the 7th shadow howled, its form beginning to disintegrate. "We were meant to rule forever." "Nothing rules forever," Kale replied, his voice barely his own anymore. "Everything ends. You just forgot that because you stopped being human so long ago." The first shadow attacked desperately, throwing everything she had. But it was too late. The light burned through her defenses, through her very essence. The second shadow's armor melted like wax. The 6th shadow's impossible geometry collapsed into normal space, making it vulnerable for the first time in millennia. And the 7th shadow, the oldest, the most powerful, felt time catch up with it at last. 3,000 years of borrowed existence came due all at once. You "You cannot do this," it gasped. "We are inevitable." "You were inevitable," Kale corrected. "Past tense. Now you're just another footnote in history." He channeled the last of his power, the last of his will, the last of everything that had ever been Kale Stormborn, and he detonated himself like a bomb.
Act 3. The Aftermath. Scene 8. What Remains. When the light finally faded, it took hours, as if reality itself needed time to adjust to what had happened. There was no cathedral, no catacombs, just a crater a mile wide, glass smooth from the heat, glowing faintly silver in the dawn light. Thomas and Elias stood at the crater's edge, staring at where their friend had made his final stand, where Kale Stormborn had chosen to burn so brightly that he'd saved the world. "Is he?" Thomas couldn't finish the question. Elias was silent for a long moment, his magical senses probing the crater. Then, "I don't feel anything. No life force. No energy signature. He's gone." Thomas sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. They'd won. The anchors were destroyed. The Shadow Council was dead. The world was safe. But the cost. All around the crater, survivors began to emerge. People from Valor Watch who'd fled the city. Warriors from other kingdoms who'd come too late to help. They stared at the devastation in awe and horror. "What happened here?" someone whispered. "A hero died," Thomas replied, his voice breaking. "The greatest hero any of us will ever know." Scene 9. The Silent World. In the days that followed, the evidence became undeniable. The shadow magic was gone. Simply gone. Villages that had fallen silent came back to life. The darkness that had consumed the sky lifted. The sun shone bright and clear for the first time in weeks. The ritual was broken. The transformation was prevented. The world was safe. But it didn't feel like victory. Memorials went up across the kingdom. For Marcus, for Lyra, for Darius, for the hundreds of warriors who died in battles that would be remembered for centuries. And at the center of every memorial, a name. Kale Stormborn. The catalyst. The man who'd saved the world by burning himself away to nothing. Thomas became a hero despite himself, one of the only survivors who'd fought in multiple anchor battles. People wanted to hear his stories, wanted to know what Kale had been like, wanted to transform a man into a legend. But Thomas remembered the truth, remembered Kale's doubts and fears, his determination and sacrifice, remembered that beneath the silver light and impossible power, there had been just a man who chose to stand when everyone else fell. "What do we do now?" Elias asked, one evening as they sat in a newly rebuilt tavern in Valor Watch. "The war is over. The enemy's defeated. But I feel lost." "We live," Thomas said simply. "We live the lives that Kale and all the others died to give us. We remember them, we tell their stories, and we make sure their sacrifice meant something. Is that enough? It has to be. It's all we have left." But in the crater where Kale had made his last stand, something strange began to happen. The silver glow didn't fade completely. It persisted, pulsing faintly, almost like a heartbeat. Scientists and mages studied it but couldn't explain it. The energy signature didn't match anything in their databases. It wasn't shadow magic, wasn't the Titan gift exactly. It was something new, something that had never existed before. Late one night, a month after the final battle, Thomas returned to the crater alone. He stood at its edge, looking at the silver glow, and whispered, "I don't know if you can hear me. I don't even know if any part of you still exists. but thank you for everything. The glow pulsed. Once. Twice. Almost like it hurt him. Thomas smiled through his tears. Maybe it was just his imagination. Maybe it was wishful thinking. Or maybe somewhere in that light, something of Cale Stormborn remained. Not alive exactly. Not dead either. Just existing. Watching over the world he died to save. Rest easy, my friend. Your war is over. You can rest now. The glow pulsed one more time, and then finally began to fade. Epilogue. 5 years later. The world had healed. Cities were rebuilt. Populations recovered. Life went on, as it always does, regardless of the wars fought in its name. Thomas was older now, his hair graying despite his youth. Leading multiple battles against gods would do that to a person. He'd become a teacher at a new warrior academy, training the next generation in the arts of combat and survival. And every class, he'd tell the same story, about a boy from Blackstone Mines who became something greater than human, who fought impossible battles and won at terrible cost, who showed that one person, properly motivated, could change the world. What happened to him? A student always asked. They knew the official story, but they wanted to hear it from someone who'd been there. He burned so bright, he saved us all. And then he was gone. But his light never really faded. It's still here in every person who chooses to stand when others fall, in every act of courage and sacrifice. That's Cale's real legacy. Not the battles he won, but the example he set. Do you think he's really gone? Another student would ask. And Thomas would smile, remembering that night by the crater, the way the light had pulsed like it hurt him. I think he's exactly where he needs to be. Standing watch, making sure the darkness never returns. That's what heroes do. They never really leave. They just transform. Become something that exists in the spaces between heartbeats, in the courage we find when we think we have none left. That sounds like a story, a skeptical student would say. Maybe it is, Thomas would agree. But then again, so was everything about Cale Stormborn. His whole life was impossible. So why should his death be any different? And somewhere, in a dimension between dimensions, in a space where reality grew thin and dreams touched waking thought, a silver light pulsed, watching, waiting, ready to answer if darkness ever threatened the world again.